everyone, my name is Joshua and I'll be teaching you how to use variables in Postman. So what are variables? So sometimes it's hard to remember information, but information is repeated multiple times in whatever you're working with. So how would you ensure that, if you have this information and everything uses it, what would be an easy way to remember it? You could use a variable to store that information. And we'll just say that information is subject to change. Then you could use that variable, reassign it to that new information, and that new information would be carried out to all corresponding things that work with that variable. So variables make it easier to work with developers, QA analysts. Those are some examples. Anyways, this time I'll be teaching how to use variables within this environment. First, or in this case, the scope is the environment. Scope meaning like what is the whole area of what I'll be working with. And in this case, it's going to be this whole environment right here. Now, you can see straight up that I could define the environment. It's the environment straight up like what your workspace is working with currently. And in this current case, there's no environment defined. So I want to create that environment. Before I do that, I have to think about, when do you know when you need to use a variable? Well, let's look at my test cases right here. Is there something that they always repeat the same information that I can almost extract out to become a variable? Yes, you can. It's going to be this whole beginning domain name. It's shared with my GET requests, POST requests, and probably with even my other tests in this sample folder that I created. So I want to define it. So the way I could define it in this test is I can go ahead and create an environment. Oh, before I do that, I want to copy this information so I don't have to type this by memory. All right, I want to create an environment. You can create it with this one right here if you never created one already, or you can push this add button right here. I want to define this environment as a regress environment. Now, in the workplace, you might have actually different official names like QA environment, staging, production, and you could go ahead and discuss with your team when you need to use these certain environments or not. It depends usually like when something's getting built closer and closer, there are certain variables that you want to test certain scenarios. So maybe that's why certain environments have slightly different variables. Anyways, what would be an easier way to memorize it for me? I would just call it domain, and the initial value is going to be regress.in, but also that's going to be its current value also, so I have to make sure I assign it as that. I click add, and when I click add, you can see this environment is already created in this manage environments dialog box. Now, here I can go ahead and start working with some of these. I could just go ahead and call this. I could go ahead to use the variables. I can. Oh, actually, something to even specify even more. How do I know if the environment is created? I go to this eye icon and I click it. Now you can see here that there's a scope for environments to show you what variables are there, or a scope for globals to show you what variables are there. Even to back up even more, globals is when you want to define it for everything, regardless of the environment. It's the whole thing you work with scope, within the scope of the Postman tool. But in this case, I just want to work with a specific environment. And I didn't choose an environment. You can see right here there's no active environment chosen. So to do that, I have to go to this environment drop-down box, click regress environment, and now if I click this eye icon again, I can see this domain is available to use with my tests. With that being said, to use these variables, I actually have to create 2 double brackets, and enclosing it would be the domain name itself. And now you'll be wondering, okay, how do I know if that variable is actually ready to use other than with this eye icon? How do I know that if it's actually being used by my test? If I slowly hover across that variable, you can see that that drop-down has a certain box that tells you what that current variable's value is going to be. And now that's working, I could go ahead and test it with a send, hitting the send request, and yes, it still has a status 200, still successful. That means it's working as expected. I have to make sure I save this too, as noted by this dot. Don't forget to save, otherwise, if something happens, then you didn't actually write in that variable. Okay, so right here again, I'll repeat it. I don't need this domain. I want to make it easier for me to remember. I'm just going to go and do double and closing brackets, hit the domain name, highlight just to make sure it's there. Yes, it is. Save, hit send, and there you go. Still a successful request. Now you might be wondering, okay, I have my environment. My environment has these certain variables, but I just want to use it with just one collection. Like, let's just say you have 6 collections right here. you only need one collection to have that variable. In this collection, they have specific credentials right here that always works when you log in. Like there are 100 tests that work with this login that has a successful request. But I don't want to keep writing all these credentials for every new test or any test I have to edit with these certain values. And plus, what if those credentials expire? I can't just change 100 of them. This is a case where you need a variable so that when you want to make a change to the credentials, you can easily make it with the variables itself. And then all those tests sharing that variable will update within less than a minute. So here you go, email and password. I want to go ahead and create variables for that within this collection itself. To do that, I copy, let's just say one of these values, which is going to be this one right here, the Eve email. I hit these 3 dots, and I hit edit. Now this edit is for within the collection itself. In this collection, I want to define a variable. Let's just say I'll call it just email. And the initial value is going to be this email. I make sure that's the current value. I hit update. Now I want to hit this password also. They're both working together. Click edit. I go to variables. I hit this variable right here and assign it to a password. And there you go. Now I have the variables email and password with their values currently. If I hit update, now I know that is ready to use. I don't think there is, unfortunately, a nice user interface where you could see those variables being used. You know if those are ready. But the best way you can do that is actually just testing it itself with one of your requests. So in this case, to use it in the body of the work, other than the URL, you saw how I could use the variables. It's just really double and close brackets. But in this case, it's in the body of one of the requests. So what I can do is I just delete all this text that I already input here, and I could just do the same thing, double and close brackets. And inside this double and close brackets, I can type in the email right here. And you can see right here that it's highlighting that, oh yes, this is the current value that you're using within this collection variable. See, scope is within the collection. That's the limit of what it can check, what level of information you can get this variable from. So I can see that I could get this email to be shared with this email key value. And I can also share the password within this collection. So now that if I have 100 tests that use the same email and password, I could just update this with a variable. So whatever changes happen in the future, I can go ahead and just send it again. And there you go, it still works. It has a successful status right here. And sometimes you might be wondering, okay, now I have these variables right here. How can I want to make sure that I can specify in the test that I'm using these credentials or passwords or anything like that. So I do console.log. And remember, when you use tests, they're all written in JavaScript. It says right here also. So I could do console.log, and then if I want to see if that variable, what that variable's information is outputting, I do pm.variables and I do get, and then I would just say I want to see what that email value was. So I do double quotations, I put the name of the variable, email, and I click save, and when I hit send, it's going to output the email information. The email variable is, and then I do a plus right here and concatenate that variable name at the end of this. Hit send again. And now you might be wondering, okay, how do I know how do I see the response of what my console is outputting when I run this in Postman? Now to do that, I actually had to go to the view button right here, and it has an option to show the Postman Console. And now this Postman Console will open, and it will show that it has been outputting this information in your last history of what requests you've been running, and also how you've been running in your console. And right here, you can see I'm logging this message from the console. The email variable is, and it has a correct email from the variable that I assigned it to. So this is kind of two useful tools. Let your imagination play how you can use it with your test or your development or anything like that. And if you don't want to, you want to clear out this information, just hit the clear button, and you can start all over again. All right, guys, I hope this is helpful. Please like and subscribe if you like this content. See you soon in the next video.